Hey, what's up everyone? John here with WebDev for you, here to help you build awesome websites without code in Webflow. So the title of this video is 7 Webflow Sins. I probably could have said like 7 Webflow mistakes, but sins just sounds more dramatic. And these are things that I've seen quite often. I worked in Webflow support for 2 years, and these are things that would pop up frequently, and I think can be mitigated with just a few simple steps. So I'll go ahead and jump right in. The first sin or kind of mistake that I see quite a bit is not naming classes. And I'm sure a lot of us are guilty of this. I think I've done this a few times where I'm just adding div blocks and I won't name something. So for example, let's say I was building out a site structure with the section. I would add a section, and as soon as you give a property to the div or element, let's say I say min height of 100 VH, it just names it automatically. And then let's say I want to add a container, and I'll set a flex setting here, and then I'll add a div block, and I'll add a container. We'll set a max width of 1440, width of 100%. We can see it just says div block, and then in here, if I add another div block, and I'll give it just some random properties here, let's say 20% in width and 500 pixels in height. And then I'll go ahead and add another div block, same thing. We'll just give it some properties. 20% and 500 pixels in height. So I'm not giving too much thought here to the layout, but just want to kind of showcase this a bit. So we have div block 3, and I can add another div. So I think you probably get the idea. If I add properties to the element prior to naming it, it'll give it an automatic class name. And so as we can see, we have these div blocks. So if I'm building a site and I have like different elements have different properties, and I have multiple sections, and they're just called div blocks, I have no real reference for what each div block refers to, so it can get really confusing really fast. So one way to mitigate this is you can rename the class name after it's been created. So I can just go back in and call this section 1 wrapper, or something to give it more of a definition, so I know what the element is. And if things are wrapped inside of other elements, I like to call parent elements wrappers. I like to, if the section is called, let's say, hero section, so I'll just call this hero section. Then I would call this div block here, this container, hero container. So there's a keyword in front of every element. This could be hero wrapper 1, or hero, some users use hero component 1 or something like that. And then you can go on and just name things, and then you call this hero image if there's an image, or hero content left, and things like that. It all depends on the structure of the site and how you're going about building it. So I won't get too in the weeds with how to name everything. That all depends on the structure of your site, but it's definitely a good idea to name elements as you add them. So you can add them, you can rename it after you add the div block. I personally like to name it right away. So if I add a div block, I'll name it right away, even before adding properties, so that it doesn't give it the opportunity to just name it div block. So I don't just add properties and then it adds its own class name. So the first thing I do before changing any elements or any sizing or properties to a div or a specific element is I give it a class name first, and make sure that the class name makes sense to the overall structure of the site. That will save you tons of time. It will make you more efficient with web development, and it'll allow you to communicate with other web developers because they'll be able to understand your website better. So if you're new to Webflow, if you're new to class naming, a few systems that I highly recommend are Client First by FinSuite. They have a whole website structuring system with class names, and if you're new to building in Webflow, this could really help with class naming. I've already developed my own structure, so I just like using my own structure for building sites, but this can help you kind of like a stepping board to class naming if you're new to Webflow and web design. The other framework is Hatch by Mackenzie Child. He also has a website called flamingo.io. .com, and this is not it, so it must be, let's see, let me just Google it, Flamingo, and flamingo.co, not .com. And it's called Hatch, so you can click Hatch, and then you can clone the framework and kind of use it to build out your site and things like that. You can also download a template from Webflow. Webflow has free templates, and just go through and see how they name everything to get a sense of like naming classes and things like that. Hatch has some free sites as well, and so does Client First. There's some clonable projects that can help with class naming. So just really highly recommend learning about class naming first prior to building a site. That can really help just keep things organized. So that's the first sin. The second one is pretty closely related to not naming classes, and that's not having a site structure. So here you can see I've added a bunch of divs. There's no real structure to it. The way I'll go and kind of showcase how I like giving structure to a site. The first thing I start off with is giving a div block. I like wrapping all the elements on one page in a div block, and I call this the main wrapper. And then inside of here, that's when I start adding elements. So then I'll add a section. Anytime there's a new section on the site, I put it in a section element, and this just helps keep things organized. So for example, if the first part is the hero section, I'll title it hero section. Then I'll add a container, and I'll call this hero container, to match the site. I'll usually give it a max width. That depends on your site structure, what your max width is, and things like that. And then inside you can start adding elements. So here I'll add a div block, and I like using flex for a lot of my elements. So I can say flex center, and I can call this hero content left, and I can copy and paste this. I can duplicate it, call it hero content right. And then in here I can add an image, for example, and here I can add some content. So that's just a quick overview of structuring a site. It's fairly straightforward. I like to have sections, containers. Containers just keep things kind of in the middle of the page, and then you can go in and start adding more divs to kind of structure your site. Again, I'm not going to get too deep into it. You can find any site on the web. For example, if I go to apple.com, this could be the hero section. This could be in a container of, let's say, 1170 pixels in width. And then I could add two div blocks here, one for this content, one could be empty, just so this content's on the left. And just go through and kind of see how I want to structure the site. So there are many videos on structuring sites. You can go through my YouTube channel and see how, all my videos, I pretty much structure the site the same way. If you want to kind of see me structure a site, I just did a Steph Curry homepage rebuild that you can go through and kind of see how I structure things. Webflow also has a great starter course where they go over HTML structure and how to structure your site in Webflow. And again, you can go through, free templates, either from Client First or Hatch, or just check out my sites as well, and get an idea for how to structure a site. But I highly recommend this Ultimate Web Design course by Webflow if you are new to Webflow, and that will go over a lot of the site structure ideas that I think are really important when building a website. Okay, so on to sin number 3, and that is images being too large. So I would run into this quite often in customer support at Webflow. So for example, if I just download any image, and let me show this in my Finder. So this image is 3.2 megabytes. It's 4,000 by 6,000 pixels. So if I go ahead and drag that into Webflow, if I go to the assets panel and I just drag that image that I just downloaded, it's going to be really large and it's going to slow down the website. So, I can go in and add that image. So for example, if I were to add it, it's just going to be a really, really large image. And Webflow even tells you here, it'll tell you very large. So 3 megabytes is very large for an image. So let me create a new folder here, and Or actually, yeah, I'll just open this image. So what I like to do, so I have this image, and what I like to do if the image is too large, first I say to myself, how large do I really need this image to be? Is it going to be a background image, or is it just going to be an actual image with specific width and height, or is it going to be in a container? I like to ask myself those questions because then it'll give me an idea for how large I want this image to be. Let's say, for example, I want it to be in the hero section, and I know my hero section has a max width of, let's say, 1440 pixels in width. Then I know the image, if it's going to use, let's say, half of that width, then we'll say 700 pixels in width. Okay, so I'm thinking maybe 1,000 pixels in height might be about as large as I need this image, right? Because I'm not using it as a background. It's going to be kind of a decoration image. It's going to be for the hero. And yeah, it doesn't need to be super huge. So I will round up. So I'll say, okay, I need the image to be 1,000 pixels in height. And that also depends on, if it's landscape or portrait, kind of using all those ideas to get a good estimate for how large I want the image to be. So once I figured that out, I'll go to Tools in my Mac and go to Adjust Size. And then I'll say, okay, I want it to be 1,200 pixels in width, or the height I want it to be 1,200 and the width would be 800. I'll say okay, and then I'll save it, hit Command S to save. And now the image, if I inspect it, the image is now 268 kilobytes. I don't even need to compress it, but I might compress it, right? I might go to, there's a few sites that I like using, Compress JPEG and Compress PNG. So this is a JPEG, so I go to compressjpeg.com and hopefully it loads, there we go. And then I'll just click, hold, and drag and place that image in there. So right now it's 262. It didn't really do much compression. I can download it. And here, that's the Steph Curry site I was rebuilding. So I can download it. It downloaded it with a -min at the end, so now it's 261 kilobytes. That's not enough for me to use the minified version, so I'd probably just use the original. So now I would delete this image. I would remove this one, so delete, and then I would click, hold, and drag. Let me see if I can. Yeah, I'll go ahead and bring the Finder in here. So yeah, this is the minified version and this is the regular version. So I can just click, hold, and drag the regular version because I resized it. And there we go. We can see Webflow doesn't say it's very large anymore. And I can go ahead and place that image in there. And perfect. So now the image isn't super large. It's not three megabytes. It's, it would be 15 times less that size. So, or yeah, maybe 12 times less. But this is very important because oftentimes, your site might load really slow, and that's because you have really large images on the site. So just resize images, get a feel for how big you think the image needs to be. If you do need it to be really big, maybe 2560 in width could be enough. Depends if you're also designing for huge screens, that's another story. But if you do have really large images, I would suggest compressing it either with Compress JPEG, or if it's a PNG, compresspng.com. And if your illustration is a vector, I would recommend SVG as well, because those are really small in size and they retain the quality of illustrations and icons really well. So that is number 3. So number 3 is just uploading really large images. Resize and compress, those are my recommendations there. I'll leave a link to Compress PNG and Compress JPEG in the link down below. Okay, so the sin number 4 is overflow on smaller devices. So I'll go ahead and use this little layout here that I've created with the hero section, hero container, hero content left, and hero content right. Now, the main reasons, so oftentimes I'll see, once the user goes to tablet or mobile, there'll be horizontal scrolling. And Webflow has a great video on this. I'll link it down below as well. But the main reason I see this, so for example, let's say we have the hero content left, and I'll give it a background color so we can see it better. We'll just do this, and then for the hero content right, we'll do something like this. Okay. So right now the 20%, 20%. So as I resize, because they're in percentages, they get smaller on tablet and mobile. And I could even do 50% for hero content left and 50% for hero content right. So if I resize, it resizes perfectly. Now what if I were to say for the width, I set the width in pixels. So hero content left is 1000 pixels and hero content right is 1000 pixels in width as well. Okay, first off, our container is only 1440 pixels max width, so we're gonna have some overflow. All right, we should have some overflow. Let's go to mobile, and yeah, I don't have any overflow here, so let me add a div block in here to try to demonstrate this better. Let me do 1200. Okay, so I think it's because the max width here. Let me remove the max width on the container. Let me set this to 1000. No. Okay, so I added an element inside of an element, and I'm giving it a width of, let's say, 500 pixels. So content right inner, something like this, and we'll give it a width of 500 or 1000 as well. Okay, so now we have some horizontal scrolling here to the right. Now this will vary for, for specific layouts, and this can happen in many different ways. I actually had to reproduce it in kind of a weird way here by going to mobile landscape and adding a div inside. But if you notice, I now have this horizontal scrolling, and I'll give it a background color here. But this element goes off the page, and if you're on mobile, the user would, scroll from left to right. Let me do something like this, and I'll add a text block in here just so we can see it. And we'll make the text, well, okay, so I can't even see it. But yeah, as you can see, by using pixels and not using percentages, we have this overflow here on the right where we have this horizontal scrolling and the element goes off the page. Hopefully that's visible, but essentially what I'm trying to communicate here is to use percentages or VW units or even Flexbox when building layouts or grid, because it'll just help keep the layout efficient, and you won't have overflow on your site. Whenever you use pixels or pixeled elements inside of other pixeled elements, and elements are larger than they're supposed to be, once you start getting down to mobile, tablet or mobile, you can run into that overflow problem, and that's because pixels aren't flexible. They're fixed width, right? So if you go on mobile landscape, the fixed width is 568, and here on mobile it's 320. So if you have an element that's bigger than 320 pixels, you're gonna run into this overflow problem. So I will leave a link to that great Webflow video where they talk more in depth about this issue on having overflow on mobile, or on tablet and mobile essentially. All right, so hopefully that was clear. There are many ways to get there, to get to that issue, and I've seen it many times, so I just wanted to kind of showcase that. Rather than using pixels, just use percentages. Again, here I can say 50%, 50%, and it just resizes beautifully on different devices. I don't have to worry about things going outside of other elements. And if I have large text, right, if I have a heading and I go to mobile, and let's say the heading is really large, and again I have to make sure I'm labeling my classes, and we have a really large heading, right, it's going off the page. Just resize the heading for, here, we'll go to desktop, I'll make it really large, and then we go to tablet. I can resize the heading on different devices, right, to make sure I don't have any overflow issues. All right, it's a very kind of simple example, but I've seen it enough times that I wanted to mention it. Percentages and different layouts are much more conducive to responsive design than just using straight up pixels for specific divs and specific layouts. All right, I think I've harped on that enough, so let me go ahead and delete this here. So the sin number 5 is still using columns. So yeah, we're jumping into sin number 5, and it's using the column element. So if I go to elements, Webflow still has this columns option here. And, we have the column settings, and we can have 3 columns, 4 columns, various columns here. Now, I kind of know why Webflow still has this. It's so like older browsers and things like that can be supported. I think that's the reason. But I think out of my 2 years working in support, I saw people using columns maybe a handful of times. Maybe I could probably count it on 2 hands the number of times I saw columns. But the times I did see it, I just thought to myself, like, why are they still using columns? Columns are kind of dated in a way, because this column here I can easily recreate with grid or flexbox and have a much easier time making it responsive. Because if I go to tablet, I might have to change the layout on tablet, and I don't even know. Yeah, it changes it for desktop. Like, it's not really conducive to responsive design. So this 3-column layout, I can build it easily in Flex. So just as an example, let's say I want 3 divs inside of this left section. Let me delete the columns. I can go ahead to the hero content left, set it to Flex. We'll do horizontal, align stretch, and justify start. I'll add a div. We'll call this hero content element, and I'll give it a background color so we can see it. We'll make it, let's make it a little bit darker. Yeah, let's just set it to black. Or you know what, better yet, we'll make it transparent, and we'll add a border of, let's say, 5 pixels. Okay, what I can do now is under flex child, just say grow if possible, and right away this element fills the available space of the parent element, and I can copy this, hit Command C to copy, and copy it as many times as I want, and just have a nice columns, or have nice columns using Flexbox. And there's so many things I can do with this. If I go to tablet, I can go to the hero content left, and rather than flex horizontal, I can say vertical, and now I have rows. So just like that, by 2 buttons, I can quickly change the layout of this element here on the left, or these divs on the left. With columns, it's much more tedious, and it's not as flexible. It's not as conducive to a responsive site, or an easy to build site, I should say, because it's very rigid. And Webflow came out with grid as well, which allows you to do amazing things with layouts. And columns, to me, just feels a bit dated. I don't recommend it. Yeah, I don't recommend using columns. And I probably should have said this at the beginning. This is all my interpretation, all kind of my opinion, if you will. But these are things that I personally would stay away from, all these ideas I'm mentioning in this video. So columns, I would kind of ditch and use either Flexbox or grid in Webflow. All right. So sin number 6 is adding interaction multiple times to the same element. Okay, so let me go ahead and delete hero content left and hero content right. And I'm gonna go ahead and just add 5 div blocks. So I'm gonna give it a class name of circle, or hero circle, and we'll give it a specific width and height for demonstration purposes. I'll say 100 by 100. Let's make it a perfect circle, 50%, and we'll give it a background color. So let's just do something like that. All right, so we have the circle, and I'll copy it 5 times. And we'll give it some margin to the left and the right. And let's say I want these circles to grow when I hover. So I'll go to the first hero circle, go to interactions, click the plus, I'll say mouse hover. We'll start an animation, click the plus, and I'll say circle hover in. On hover, we'll say scale, and we'll scale it to 1.5. Okay, we'll say easing for the ease. I'll click save, then I'll start an animation. I'll duplicate this, click on it, and I'll call this circle hover out, and I'll just scale it back to 1. Okay, so if I preview, the circle scales, nice. So let's say I want to apply it to the other circles, the same animation. I can go in, and this is a mistake I see, rather than using this kind of shortcut in Webflow. Some users will just click the hero circle and they'll add that same animation multiple times to the same element. Okay, so this is really a time sink because you'll lose a lot of time doing this. You have to go to each animation and add the interaction. And I'm just doing it here for demonstration purposes, but as you can see, it is taking me a good amount of time. Okay, and hover out, start animation, hover out. So to apply that animation, you saw how long that took to apply the animation to all circles. There is a much quicker way to do this. Webflow allows you to assign interactions to elements with the same class name. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the interaction off all of these except the first one. And as you can see, none of these have that lightning bolt symbol. They don't have interactions except the first one. So all I have to do is go into the first one and make sure when I click in that, okay, interaction trigger is selected, that's fine. Yeah, so that looks good. So rather than assigning the class or the interaction to multiple elements, I can just go under trigger settings and say any class with any element with the class hero circle, apply this animation to it. So now if I preview, they all have that animation and all I had to do was click one button. So rather than just affecting an element, which is this first one, and none of these have it, I can go under trigger settings and select class, and now they all have it. All right, so just a quick little shortcut. You can apply animations to same elements by clicking class here rather than element. And I go over interactions a lot on my YouTube channel where I go over, applying animations to, here under effect, we can affect class or selected element. When you select class, you can affect multiple elements inside of a parent element, and it kind of goes in the weeds a little bit. So I suggest if you're new to interactions, checking out my YouTube channel because I go over a lot of different interactions and how to animate multiple elements using these kind of shortcuts in Webflow where we're affecting multiple classes rather than just a specific element. All right, so that's sin number 6. And the last one is kind of, it's not designing in Webflow, but I would see it so many times that I just have to go over it. And that is plans and pricing in Webflow. So you can save a lot of money using Webflow if you know that you're just building one site, for example, and that site only needs a site plan. Some users will purchase a workspace. So Webflow now has site plans and workspaces. Some users will purchase a workspace and they only need one website with a site plan and a custom domain. So if you only need one website, or if you don't need to build multiple websites without site plans, then I just recommend purchasing a site plan for every site you're building. Because if you know you need a custom domain and the site is going live, then all the limitations of not having, let's say, a workspace are removed when you add a site plan. So if I need one website and a custom domain and I want to use CMS, I have a content management system or a blog, then I can just purchase a CMS site plan for $16 a month or 20 a month, billed monthly, or $16 a month, billed yearly. I do not need a workspace if I only need one site with a hosting plan. I just need a site plan. If I want to build multiple projects without site plans, then I would need a workspace, because the starter, the free plan, only allows for 2 unhosted sites, and the core allows for 10. The growth allows for unlimited hosted sites, and then there's enterprise. So these account plans, I would say, are more for agencies or teams that need multiple sites without site plans. But if you know what you're building, you say, okay, I need one website with a custom domain. I don't need to build multiple sites without site plans. I can get a free starter plan in Webflow. I can start building the project right away. And then once I run into limitations, let's say I need to add more pages or I need to add more items to the CMS, I can add the CMS site plan. All those limitations will be removed, and I can build that site as if I had an account plan, but I just added a site plan, and I don't have those limitations of working on a free account plan because I've added a site plan. So again, if you only need a couple of sites or a site with a custom domain, just purchase a site plan. The limitations will be removed on that project, and you can build to your heart's content. You can add more than 2 pages. You can add, on a CMS, you can add up to 2,000 CMS items, and you can even have 3 guest editors in the editor. Okay, and you can read about the different site plans here. So that's number 7, purchasing an account plan when you don't need one, and just purchasing a site plan can save you a bit of money there. Okay, so there is a number 8. It's an honorable mention. I wasn't able to get a great embed code, but number 8 is if you're adding custom code to Webflow, make sure you close the tags. So if I'm adding some CSS properties, I want to make sure that I have the style close tag here. Same for JavaScript. If I have a body tag, I want to make sure that the body tag is closed. With any code that I add to Webflow, make sure there's a closing tag, because oftentimes when custom code is added and there's not a closing tag, it can break the entire site, because Webflow is looking for that custom code to be closed, and if it's not, it'll just break everything, because the code is not properly set within Webflow. I didn't have a great example for an embed, but I might showcase that at some point in another video. But if you are adding custom code and your site breaks, make sure that all of your custom code tags are closed, whether it's CSS, an embed element, even SVG elements, anything with code. Just double check your code, make sure things are properly set so it doesn't break your site. Working in support, Webflow didn't really support custom code, but I would have, I'd often help users with their custom code and just look really quick. And oftentimes it would be a simple fix like closing the script tag, closing the body tag. Or actually, I kind of did that not correctly. It wouldn't be the body tag here. Let's go back in it. Where did I add that code? Oh, I didn't save it. The code here would be a script tag, not a body tag. So script, not closing the script tag in, let's say, the body section. If you have a script and you don't close it, it can really cause issues with Webflow. Same in the head section if you have style tags and you don't close them. All right, cool. So I think that is it for the Webflow 7 sins. I know that title is a bit dramatic, but yeah, they're just mistakes, things that can easily be avoided in Webflow and can make for an easier time building sites in Webflow. So again, to recap, the Webflow 7 sins are not naming classes. You can use client first if you're new to naming classes, or Hatch by Flamingo Mackenzie Child. Not having, number 2 is not having site structure. Highly recommend this Ultimate Web Design course by Webflow to learn more about site structure, or watch videos on my YouTube channel and see how I structure my sites. Images being too large, downloading an image from Unsplash or wherever and not resizing it and not compressing it. You can use compressed PNG or compressed JPEG to make those images smaller. And overflow on smaller devices, I know I harped on that quite a bit, but essentially it's just using pixels for elements rather than percentages or flex settings. And then once you get down to smaller devices, those pixels, as you can see here, I use pixels, so they're getting squished and it doesn't look very, very good. So yeah, just using percentages, like I could say, I'm not going to do it now, but I could give percentages to these circles, or actually I can go here under flex and just make it vertical and, just distance them like that to have a vertical layout. But using pixels can often have that overflow issue on mobile devices or tablet and mobile. And I'll leave a link in the description area below where Webflow talks about that quite a bit. Sin number 5 was still using columns. Don't recommend columns. Either use flex or grid for your layouts. They're much easier to work with. Sin number 5 is adding interactions to multiple elements when you can just go in and select class here rather than element. And sin number 7 was purchasing an account plan in Webflow when you only need a site plan. And number 8, the honorable mention, was not closing your custom code tags and kind of breaking the site that way, or having issues with the site because a style tag or script tag is not closed. So that is it for this video, the 7 Webflow sins. Let me know if there's other quote-unquote sins that you think should be avoided, or mistakes that should be avoided in Webflow that you've seen quite a bit, or that you've seen users run into, and we can discuss in the comment section below. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video tutorial. Thank you.